We're back for another wonderful episode, and I have Molly Sider in the house. Molly, good to have you here. I'm so excited to have some time with you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yay. All right, let me tell you a little bit about Molly. Molly is a midlife change coach and the creator and host of the podcast, I Am This Age, proving you're never too old to make a significant change. When Molly turned 40, she needed proof that she wasn't too late or too old to find her, quote, extraordinary, unquote. Career, love, friendships. She sought meaning in all of it and found her life purpose in the process. Now she's a coach, a motivational speaker, and a podcast host, and she helps a lot of people with their lives and have meaning. Let's dive in. I love that. One of the things you've shared with me is sharing your story has helped you in your life. So what do you mean by that? It's helped you in your life.
Well, that is true. So I'm a storyteller. I get up on stages and tell true personal narratives like the Moth style, if you've ever heard of the Moth.
Mm,
Um,
I have heard of it, but I don't remember what it is. So what's Moth style?
okay. So the Moth is a storytelling platform. It's now on NPR. You can listen to it like on Saturday mornings, I believe, but they also have it in podcast form. And it's basically just people going to a bar or a theater. I think it's in every city across the country. And there's a theme, and you put your name in the hat, and they pick 10 names out of the hat, and those 10 people get up on stage and they have 5 minutes to tell their
Oh,
story, and it has to be true
wow.
and personal to them. And then
Ah,
there's like a panel of judges, and somebody wins and goes to like the next round. But so sort of in that same vein, although I don't ever do it where it's a competition. There's a huge storytelling community here in Chicago where I live.
mm,
And I had always loved the Moth. I've always liked to write. And I started taking storytelling classes back in, I don't remember, 2017 or 2018, and found this huge community in Chicago. And so started to get up on stages and tell my own stories. And I've always been this like immensely private person.
mm.
And when I started to share these stories with people, it just, I've always struggled with vulnerability, but somehow getting up on a stage is a little bit easier for me to be
Wow,
vulnerable.
people are being like, what?
One-on-one.
Getting on a stage
I know,
is
I know.
less vulnerable. Interesting. Okay.
I know. There's like enough separation between me and
Mm,
the audience that somehow it feels more comfortable than
yeah,
sitting face to face one-on-one with somebody,
makes
where
sense.
it often feels really uncomfortable and scary to
Yeah.
share like your innermost secrets and
Yeah.
embarrassing moments and shame. But getting up on a stage and doing this has really changed my life, because what was always happening, I would get up on stages and I would tell these like really personal stories. And afterwards, there was always someone, or usually multiple people, coming up to me and saying, "Thank you so much for sharing that story. That was a really important story to tell. I needed to hear that." Something like that.
Mm,
And I realized, I mean, I had started to realize this along the way, but it sort of solidified my knowing of, oh, most likely if I'm feeling a certain way, someone else in the room is either feeling the same way, has felt that way before, or knows somebody who has. Like, we're
yeah.
not that unique in our emotions. And so I started doing it more and more and more. And it was like the creating of those connections in the community that made me feel so much more self-confident. I'm like, oh, I'm not the only one who's feeling this way. And when we don't do that, when we don't share ourselves, we just sort of harbor this immense amount of shame. It just builds and builds and builds, and it sort of starts to control us. And when we let it out and we create those connections and we realize we're not alone in those feelings,
Hmm.
it doesn't feel so bad. It lightens the load. It's easier to live with. And you're just, using up much less energy to hide who you are. from the world because now it's just like it's out there. It doesn't matter as
100%.
much. Yeah.
100%.
That's how it's
You're
shaped
you're
up.
you're singing my song. I mean, the tagline on my book in my book is shed the shame and live life out loud. And my documentary, where I don't know if you know, I did a documentary, 9-minute documentary where I got naked and body painted for the whole world to see.
Wow.
And it was a documentary on body image and body shame. And I talked about shame, and I talked about how shame grows in the dark. And that is what I do in my way, which is get the light on it, reveal it, release it, because the more we hold it and the more we hide it, the more it has power over us and the more painful it is. So, oh my God, I'm digging this. So you found a way. And by the way, I had people coming up to me crying as well, going, thank you. I feel less alone. I thought I was the only one that like felt so horrible about my body and felt like I was so ugly. And it's like, thank you. Thank you. So like your work with the stories, people were hearing you and then going, oh my God, I'm not as alone anymore. That is so powerful.
Yeah. It's really powerful. I love that you found another way to connect and to be vulnerable and to release some of your shame. It's so great. And so what I'm taking from that is, and what I'm always telling people is like, you do not have to get up on a stage and do what I
Right.
do
And I always say, you
in
don't
order
have to
to
get
do this.
naked. That's what I
Right.
like. You don't have to be
Right.
naked to do this.
Right. But obviously, like, we did it in two completely different ways. We did it in two very large ways, but there are other ways to do this, to share yourself and to create that connection and to release, whatever dark story that you're hiding. And
Yeah.
there are all sorts of ways to do it. The best way, I mean, I think the best way is through the coach or a therapist, somebody
Yeah.
who professionally trained to listen and to reflect back at you your story and to provide a new perspective that you haven't considered yet. Because when we are just holding our own stories in our head and not sharing them, we're biased,
Yeah. Yeah. We
one
only know what we
perspective.
know.
We only know what we know. And then, of course, we go out into the world and we look for proof of that story. And it's easy
Yeah.
to find. It's easy for us to find. It's like, see, that happened. So see, I knew I wasn't good enough or I wasn't attractive enough
Exactly.
or whatever. But when you start to share with other people, that all that changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. So I'm curious for you, was there ever a story or something that you shared that actually changed how you are, like less vulnerable, more empowered? Is there anything in particular that you experienced that it helped you get stronger by revealing it?
I mean, there's so many. But I think since this podcast, and I think your community is really interested in like love and relationships, it seems like that was one of the stories that really, really helped me because I started my podcast. One of the biggest reasons was that I was just out of a really not great relationship. I was 39 and I was approaching 40, and I was like, I never married, I don't have kids. And I'm like, oh,
My life is over. I'm
yeah, my life is
40.
over. Right. Right. Did I miss my chance? I had a friend actually
Mm,
on my 40th birthday. I was out to dinner with a couple of my friends. And my one friend said to me about our other friend sitting there, who's this like gorgeous, beautiful. I mean, we're all beautiful, but she's, classically beautiful. And and my other friend kind of looked at me and she was like, I mean, she's so pretty, people still look at her, when she walks in the room. She's like, and she looked at me and she said, but no one's looking at us when we walk in a room anymore. And I was like, ouch.
mm, mm.
And that was a big moment for me. I was like, this is not, I don't believe in that, like, or I don't want to believe in that. So how do I prove that story wrong?
Ooh, how
First
do
way.
I prove that story wrong? You didn't sip the Kool-Aid. You were like, okay, thank you for offering the Kool-Aid, but maybe that's not my truth. Keep going. Love it.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't say didn't completely drink it because
Right, right,
I did
right.
believe some of it. I heard it
Sure.
from somebody else and I was worried that that was true.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to explore, like, could there be another
Love
perspective?
it.
Could there be
Yeah.
another story here? Because I don't want to believe it, but also
Yeah.
I'm feeling really bad right now. That made me feel really terrible.
Aw.
And I already was kind of feeling that way. I was
Yeah.
already like, it was my 40th birthday, and I was just like, what am I doing with my life? and um and so that's when I started the podcast, because I was like, well, I need to find stories from people out there who are, living outside the box, or finding their, quote, happiness later in life. And is it possible? And I
Mhm.
need proof and I need representation.
Yeah.
Then I couldn't find anybody doing a podcast on that. So I was like, I guess I'm going to start my own. And I did.
Fill the need.
The need. But, I think for so long there was a lot of shame and embarrassment around the fact that I, wasn't married, that I didn't, and I dated throughout my 30s, but I didn't really have any like real significant relationships. And for, a number of reasons, I was living in New York and I was like, I want to figure out my career. I was in the wine industry at the time and I was just having fun with my friends. And also, that was the story I was often telling people, like, oh, I'm not focusing on it. But really, internally, I really wanted to find a relationship. Um, and I would just play it off like, I don't really care. I'm this independent woman. I'm focusing on my career and I'm a New Yorker and blah, blah, blah. Um, and what I realized when I turned 40 and I had already been doing a lot of this work on myself, but um when I started to really like dive in and dig around in this story and this narrative of mine, what I realized was no, I really just have always wanted a really like emotionally deep connection with somebody. And none of the people I was dating or meeting were sort of up for that. And I also didn't know how to get that. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted it, and I had no idea how you do that.
Mhm.
Um, and I
Yeah.
It took until my 40s to figure that out, and frankly still figuring it out. I'm in a relationship right now, and we have great connections and great conversations, and
We're always figuring it out. There
always figuring
it's
it out.
a
Right,
never-ending unfolding of
right.
figuring it out, which is
Mhm.
the beauty of relationships because each relationship is gonna give us another opportunity to learn and expand and grow, and that's kinda par for the course. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the beginning of the pandemic, I was dating somebody, and it shortly, like, maybe a month or so into the pandemic,
Mhm.
I fizzled apart. And that was really when I was like, okay, how am I contributing? What do I like about myself? What do I not like about myself? How do I want
Mhm.
to actually show up in relationships to people? And what kind of relationship do I really want?
Yeah.
It after doing a ton of work
Yeah.
in all the areas, but also in relationships and love, um, it occurred to me that like, oh, I was never ready for the type of relationship that I have now or that I want,
Yeah.
like, and I couldn't have been until now. Like, I just couldn't, it would have been impossible.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
saying that out loud and talking about it and letting people know and being able to
Yeah.
answer, even like when I met my current boyfriend, like actually just share, it was really scary to share that with him because,
But
we
to own it, like you were owning,
own it.
like you came home to your truth and
Yeah.
it wasn't like this horrible, bad, shameful thing anymore because you owned it. I mean, like, that's what I'm hearing. Would you say that's kind of what happened for you by sharing it?
100% what happened, because we all go on first dates and people are always like, so why aren't you in a relationship, or when was your last, I would get this all the time, like, when was your last long relationship and how long was it? And
Yeah.
like, that question held so much shame around it for me,
Yeah.
because
What's
I was
wrong
like,
with me? How do I answer this? I
right,
something must be wrong.
yeah.
And how do I share that? Because if they're asking that, then, and that's where we can spiral down. So you
Yeah.
shifted the narrative.
Yeah, and there were plenty of people who I sort of practiced this answer on, and
Nice.
they never wanted to talk to me again, and I'm like, that's fine. That person isn't for me.
Yeah.
Like, hurts a little bit, and also I don't want to be with that person anyway. And then when I met my current boyfriend, and we, first of all, he never really asked me that, but eventually you get into past
Hmm.
relationships and how you were and where things went wrong and all that stuff. And it was so much easier for me to share it with him. And he was so receptive to it because he had been married for a really long time, but he had all this other, internal narrative and shame around his story and why his marriage didn't work.
Right.
And it was really
All
no
the different
different.
stories, all the
Yeah.
different stories. So I'm curious. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um, are there certain stories, like certain themes that you have found that are common when it comes to what people hide? Because I know for me, as a shadow work coach, because I'm literally shining a light on the stuff that they're hiding, there are certain stories that have a bigger impact that they're really scared to reveal. Have you noticed that?
Um, I think that, like, people have different, like, I don't feel safe, or I think really the biggest one is like, I'm not good enough.
Yep,
Um,
bullseye. Mhm.
yeah, I think that's what most people seem to feel, and there are all sorts of ways of navigating through that. But yeah, I think, and that's certainly my internal story. It has always been, I'm not good enough. I'm not
Yeah,
good enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
And where would you start with someone like that? Because I mean, I know you're helping people unpack some of their most shameful stories. For this woman who's listening, going, "Wow, this is resonating, and I really am challenged with vulnerability and sharing some of these uncomfortable stories." Where might this person start? And I hear, yes, coaching and mentoring, we know that that is so amazing when you have somebody outside to help you. For this woman, for today, right now, like what might be a good first step for her?
I think the best first step is literally listening to this, or listening to someone else who has a story to tell. Listening is so important.
Mm,
Sharing our stories is important too, but listening is such a huge component. And so, if you're new to this and you're like, I feel icky, I'm definitely hiding some icky story inside of me. Just keep listening, find other people who are willing to share their stories, and just listen. And that's it. That's
yeah.
all you got to do.
Oh,
Yeah.
especially with women. I mean, we're wired for connection and supporting each other and nurturing each other. And what I see over and over and over, especially in my women's groups, is when and all because I've been doing women's groups for over 30 years. And when especially in person, when somebody drops into a vulnerable place and the tears start, it's like it gives everybody permission to open as well. And suddenly the room or the group, I mean, even virtually, because it's just women holding that space. Suddenly, oh my God, we feel such a depth of connection and understanding, and we lean in, and it allows us all to just kind of go, oh, I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in this.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Yeah, absolutely. I think that sometimes it can feel scary to be in a group setting like that too. Like, maybe one-on-one might feel actually more comfortable for some people if you're not me. Um,
Again, different. Yeah. And that's where that's
but
for the woman who's listening. It's like, it's so important, sister, that it's like, if whatever works for you. So,
yeah,
Molly might be like more one-on-one. You might be thinking, speaking to the woman who's listening or watching, you might be thinking, oh, I really love being in a group setting. Know yourself, dip your toe, and try. Molly and I were talking about, just do something,
yeah,
don't keep hiding, because there's such a high price people
yeah.
pay when they hide their stories, their shame,
Yeah.
their,
And also,
yeah.
again, like, the group setting, like, just provides you an opportunity to listen. Like, if you're not quite ready to share or take
Mhm.
that step, you're still creating the connection that is so powerful and so
Yeah,
meaningful, even if you don't say a word in the meeting or in the group.
absolutely.
So
Just
important.
being there. Absolutely. And I know you have your podcast, I Am This Age. I'm just curious, how does that podcast help people know that it's not too late and that they can still believe it's possible for love or new careers or just overall change in whatever it is they want to shift in their life? How does that work for your podcast?
So the podcast is interviews, and it's all about their, like, people's change stories. And of course, everyone's story is different. But what I love to get into are the fears and the insecurities and all the emotions that go through making a big change and how you navigate
Yeah.
through it. Because to me, that's the most important and impactful part. It's the juicy part,
Yeah.
So that's really it. If you're like contemplating change, or if you're like, man, I really want to do something new. I've always wanted to do this thing, but I don't think that I could never do something like that.
Yeah.
All of those feelings, like I have people on my show who have done things like that, and everyone gets super vulnerable, which is amazing. And so we really get in it and the emotions, and that's just like the really, really helpful piece. So you don't feel alone.
Yeah.
There's representation. Oh, that person did it and they started from nothing, or you know, whatever it is. It's just like everybody, we need each other. We need community. We need teams. We
Yeah.
cannot do anything by ourselves. We can't do life alone. We're
Yeah.
not made to do life alone. That's not how we're built as human beings. Like it's just not. And I
Exactly.
think a lot of people believe, or at least, you know, generations above me, my generation and the generations above me, I think, as a generalization, have been taught that like the stronger way to be is to muscle through by yourself. And
That's our culture. Don't look vulnerable. Don't look weak.
Mm.
Do everything on
Well,
your own.
right.
Yeah.
And it's impossible. And it's just, can I swear?
Go for it.
It's bullshit,
Yeah.
everybody. It is bullshit. You
Yeah.
cannot do it by yourself. You need help. There is no like, professional athlete or movie star or anybody who's like, at the
An
top of
island.
their game, who is right, who
Yeah.
not who doesn't have a team of people to help them be the best person that they can possibly be. You can't do it
Yeah.
alone. So quit trying. Reach out
Yeah.
for help no matter what that looks like. Yeah.
Totally, totally. There's a movie that I'm thinking of as soon as you were sharing that. It was Into the Wild. I
Mm.
think Sean Penn directed it. It's a true story about a young man that graduated, I think, law school, but I don't remember what he graduated, but a true story. And he decided to go against the grain of this is how your life is supposed to be and check the boxes and do this. And he went out into the wilderness. And I will just share it didn't go necessarily well.
I know the book.
And the big mess, what'd you say?
I know the book.
Yeah, yeah. And then there was the life is not meant to be done alone. We need each other. I love that you're a message of hope and permission to share. I just also want to say that when I work with people and I talk about, opening up and being vulnerable, I call it strategic vulnerability. And that, for the woman who's listening right now, it's like, okay, we're talking about revealing and not hiding your shame anymore, to also be very mindful of baby steps, dip your toe, and who are you sharing your vulnerable self with? Because it is a gift that you share your heart and your vulnerability, and not everybody deserves it or can handle it. And so to be really mindful of how you do it, because the last thing Molly and I want is for you to go, okay, I'm just going to not that you would do that, because you probably have a lot of conditioning saying, do not share this. However, Molly and I are totally in agreement that it's time to open and connect with other people so you're not hiding your beautiful, amazing self. Would you agree, Molly?
Yeah, 100%. And learning how to be vulnerable and share doesn't mean that you can't also have privacy. Like
Yes.
there's a difference between the two. So yes, I love that strategic vulnerability. That's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you have something special to offer this woman. Pray tell, what is it?
Yes. So I am a life coach, and I work with people in midlife, of course, in the same vein of my podcast, but people who are, feeling like, all right, I'm in midlife and like I want something more, I want to contribute to something bigger, and I'm not sure how to do that. And so I am offering your first free um, coaching session, or your first coaching session is free.
Yeah.
Sorry, when you decide to work with me. So that's amazing, and you can find all of that information on my website. Everything that you'll ever need to know about me is on my website, which is just mollysider.com.
Yep. SIDER. And the link will be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Love, love, love what you're doing. Just another aside, it was about a month or two ago, I did something that sounds very similar to the Moth. I did a story slam, and there were 6 or 7 of us that went up in front of a group of about 20, 30 people. And and I went up and told a story. Doesn't matter what it was, but what was interesting, and it was huge. I have to write a blog about this. I haven't done this yet. Was when they said they needed someone to tell a story, like a month before, I signed up and I was like, yeah, I have a great story I want to tell. And then when it's time to tell the story, I went up and I told the story. Then I sat down and I was like, oh my God, I did this whole thing without freaking out, because years ago, and not that long ago, like maybe 15, 20 years ago, I couldn't speak in front of people. I couldn't speak in groups. I was terrified of being in the light. Oh my God, like nauseous, on the bowl, can't leave the bathroom, terrified. And here I was sitting, having revealed this story, and I had so much fun, because I greased the wheel
Yeah.
of sharing vulnerably, sharing my truth, and really coming home to who I am without apology. And so it's been a journey. I have gone on my journey. So for those of you that are going, well, that's all great for you. Well, there was a time when I really couldn't be seen or heard. I was in the background and I was terrified.
Yeah.
And now I can speak in front of thousands of people without, like, maybe a little nervous, but it's certainly not going to, it's more excitement than a nervousness. And so we start where we start. And it starts with just acknowledging that maybe you're holding back in some way. So baby steps, baby steps. You could reach out to Molly for her first session, first session with her. Any last words do you have before we wrap this beautiful time together?
This was so nice to talk with you in this capacity, and I love what you just said about, baby steps. And also I just want to say that I get nervous every single time. I get nervous before podcasts. Like, I
Yeah.
get nervous before everything that's normal. But this was so great, and I love what you're doing. And so just, I don't know, keep up the good work, and thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. And I'm going to be on your podcast soon, sharing my vulnerable story.
Yes, you are.
Yes, and I will get vulnerable, and I look forward to doing that with you.
Same.
Thanks again, Molly. This has been amazing.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day, y'all. Mwah. One more thing before you go. Have you taken my Discover Your Love Avatar quiz? It's a 2-minute quiz that can help you not only know your strengths, your superpower, because you have one, also identify some of your blind spots, some of the things that might be having you in your fear, having you behaving in ways that aren't in alignment with your highest self, the way you want to be when it comes to dating and relationships. And it'll also help you discover why maybe the stars haven't lined up for you yet. Bottom line is, you take this 2-minute quiz, you get a full report in your email with details on how to move forward in next level love, whether you want a partner or not. So you can go to midlifeloveoutloud.com/love quiz. The link is in the show notes as well. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to the station, I'm going to encourage you to do that too, so you don't miss any episodes. And I hope you got a ton out of today's. See you next week. Mwah.